Star Wars 7x7, episode 2309. We are going to finish up our series of deeper dives into Season 1 of The Mandalorian, today looking at Redemption. That's the final episode, episode 8 from Season 1. A lot of interesting parallels in this episode. Punch it! Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Boybon, and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy, and thank you so much for joining me for it. And speaking of joy, specifically, we'll be talking about joy a little bit later as well in the show, but today I want to get started by talking about some interesting parallels that show up in Mandalorian Season 1, Episode 8. And they in particular tie in both just within the episode itself, but also to another particular Star Wars story. And it didn't strike me the first time that I watched this episode, but when I saw it again, it finally hit me. The scene where Djarin's parents put him down in the little, supply bunker thing. The, looks like kind of, the entryway down to a basement, basically. But when they put him in there and stash him, and then, the battle droid opens it up and is shot by a Mandalorian, and the Mandalorian comes up and, puts his arm down and, pulls the kid up and rescues him, young Din Djarin. It really struck me that was very similar to Rogue One. It was very similar to young Jyn Erso being down in that hiding spot and Saw Gerrera coming for her. Of course, that was part of an escape plan that had been plotted out by Saw Gerrera with the Ersos long before, whereas this was very much of a spur-of-the-moment thing. But it turns out to be much the same thing. I mean, Saw Gerrera adopts Jyn and brings her into his group of partisans and trains her in the way of the partisans. And similarly, Din Djarin is taken in by Death Watch. Yes, if you actually look at the Mandalorian who picks him up and rockets away with him, he has on his shoulder the mark of Death Watch. So that's more suggestive evidence that there's a chance somehow a young Din Djarin may have had an association with Pre Vizsla, who was the leader of Death Watch, and Bo-Katan, the sister of the Duchess Satine. Bo-Katan was in Death Watch, and we've talked about previously, the Wren clan was under House Vizsla, and so that could also be a situation where he could be connected to the Wrens and Sabine Wren from Star Wars Rebels, or at least have some sort of association, some knowledge of their family. But back to the parallels. So there's the parallel of Din Djarin being rescued by the Mandalorians and indoctrinated into the Mandalorian culture, as Jyn Erso was indoctrinated into Saw Gerrera's partisan culture. So that's one parallel that happens. Another parallel that happens within the episode itself is that the scene with that Mandalorian rocketing away with Din Djarin during that flashback situation, that's echoed near the end when Din Djarin himself rockets away carrying Baby Yoda. And it's that particular attention to storytelling and those loop closures and callbacks and whatnot, I really do think that's part of the ingredients to the Mandalorian success. And so that's the main point that I wanted to flag. The other points that are worthy of our consideration as we head into Season 2. First of all, the fact that Moff Gideon is a former Imperial Security Bureau officer who was part of the Night of a Thousand Tears, or at least referenced it, which has to do with the Siege of Mandalore. So this goes back to 19 BBY. It is different from the Great Purge. We don't know exactly when in the Imperial era the Great Purge took place, but there were a lot of Mandalorians killed on that particular event, the Night of a Thousand Tears, the Siege of Mandalore, so that certainly did not help the Mandalorians' cause. And speaking thereof, we find out that Mandalorian covert did not do well in the aftermath of the Mandalorians' departure. In fact, it wasn't that the bounty hunters killed them, it was that the Imperials arrived as a result of all the chaos, and that's what caused most of the Mandalorians to get killed, though the Armorer does say that some may have escaped off-world, so it opens up the door to possibility that we could encounter some of those Mandalorians in the future. That's another way that they are setting things up potentially for surprises and other elements they can weave into the Season 2 narrative. We also learn that Greef Karga isn't just an expediter for the Bounty Hunters Guild, which is how he's been described to us before, but Moff Gideon refers to him as a disgraced magistrate. And to his credit, also, Greef Karga talks about my town this and my town that and what the Imperials have done to it. So it actually does suggest that he is more than just the guy running the guild in this area of the galaxy, that he is actually somehow not the elected representative perhaps, but some sort of version of civil power in the area as well. And as far as the Bounty Hunters Guild, though, even with everything that's happened, certainly still powerful enough to be able to handle the minor clerical issue, as Cara Dune puts it, of her chain code and the fact that she has bounties out on her head, and also clearing the Mandalorian of his issues with the guild and saying, hey, you know, take some time off and then come back and you can have the pick of the bounty hunting litter. And he says, yeah, I think I have some stuff to do first. So it does kind of set up the possibility that some of the, the non-mythology episodes of season 2, that there may be some, episode of the week situations where they don't build the whole overall story, but we do know that he's going to come back to Navarro. He is going to see Greef Karga and Cara Dune, who will now be working as Greef Karga's enforcer. And that does seem to suggest that he's going to come back at some point to ask for a couple of bounties to be able to pay the bills and, just go gallivanting around the galaxy and give us a break from the broader overall story. And so that, I think, is what we have to look forward to in season 2 of The Mandalorian, or at least part of it. There's the whole Moff Gideon thing, which is another issue entirely, and chances are he still wants the child, and nobody knows what the child really represents, at least not as far as Moff Gideon is concerned, or at least no one knows what it represents to him. So maybe more of that will be revealed as well, what Gideon thinks about the child and what his plans are for him. So, before we get to that last bit of joy business, I do just want to give you the quick reminder, once again, if you have not yet done the rating and review thing on iTunes for Star Wars 7x7, I hope this is the day you're going to do it. I'm only going to be talking about it for a couple more days before we move on to another situation, but please, if you haven't done it yet, I hope you will do it today. It takes just a couple of seconds to do a rating on iTunes and just a moment or two to do a review, and it does help more people find Star Wars 7x7. So thank you again for considering it. Thank you for doing it. And if you've already done it, thank you so much for supporting me in the show in that way. All right, so I did say last episode that I believe that Greef Karga, Carl Weathers' line, he's trying to eat me, is the funniest moment of the whole season 1. And I'm going to stand by that, even though we have this opening scene in episode 8 where the scout troopers are punching Baby Yoda inside that carry bag. But I'm sort of hedging my bets around this by saying that that is certainly the best skit for all intents and purposes. That's the best scene comedically in The Mandalorian, with then IG-11 showing up and beating him up and saying, I'm sorry you had to see that to Baby Yoda. Like, that whole scene, funniest scene overall. I think the funniest moment, the funniest one-liner still goes to Greef Karga, but funniest scene has to be the Scout Troopers. And oh, goodness, I hope that there are similar moments of comedy in season 2 as well. I think that we're going to be in good hands. We're going to keep our fingers crossed that this all works out. But that is everything that we're going to talk about here in the show about episode 8, about redemption. And that's going to do it then for the show Star Wars 7x7 today as well. Thank you so much for joining me for it, as always. And may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
Star Wars 7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2020 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.